on demolition of residential and significant structures. Charlie or Diana? Who's
Diana
doing
will
this?
make the staff presentation on this.
This item is about the residential demolition ordinance and the significant buildings preservation ordinance. These ordinances require city council approval for demolition of residential or significant structures, along with approval for replacement structures, because the council wishes to be the final approval body for demolition, and a required finding is that the replacement structure would be as well designed as the building to be demolished. Two issues have been raised about these ordinances. The first is that a project has to go through a planning commission hearing before obtaining city council approval for demolition, and the council is likely to require additional design changes after the planning commission approval. Possible responses are to allow the planning commission to approve demolition, which the council's rejected before, to separate demolition approval from approval of the replacement structure, which there are reasons why these things are linked. To limit city council review to the demolition permit, or to keep the ordinances as they are. The second issue is that property owners who plan to demolish properties might neglect them. Potential responses are to make a list of residential structures to be kept, to buy and rehabilitate neglected properties, or to continue the Community Preservation Committee's process. Staff recommends keeping the ordinances as they are and continuing to suggest study sessions as a way to get a council read before the applicants go to the Planning Commission, and continuing to use the Community Preservation Committee to deal with property neglect. So that was the quick version.
Okay,
This is your item, Councilmember Bukowski.
yeah, I mean, I have some questions about it. If you're going to designate a building as historic, then it has some value. So if somebody has a property and they don't come in with a new project that is so wonderful, they don't get down to take down the older building. But if somebody comes in with a spectacular project, they get to take down the old building. I mean, either the building has historical preservation significance or it doesn't. I don't think the new project should be the basis upon which you decide you want to get rid of the old building. I mean, I think we should go through and take an inventory of these older buildings, and that the property owners should know what they have. There shouldn't be any doubt about it. They shouldn't have to wait till they make an application to discover that they can't take the building down. I mean, we're either going to designate some buildings that have to be preserved or not, and I don't think the approval of the new project should be a part of every application. Now, certainly if you've got several properties that you're putting together and there's one building in the way, and the mega project, is of such great value, then you could decide to take down the older building. But I think that we either have to decide that these buildings have character and we want to retain them or not. I don't think it should be based on every individual.
So I have a question for you, if I may.
Oh, yes.
So are you saying that de facto, whatever that structure looks like, if it meets, the enough characteristics, that takes precedence over maybe an undesirable use of that building?
I'm suggesting that we do an inventory of the older buildings and then notify property owners that they have a significant building that they're not going to be able to take down or that we want to preserve. Then this would be an encouragement for them to keep the building up. Because if they know they got to keep it, then they're not going to let it deteriorate.
I guess what my question, though, is what do you do with a building that has an undesirable use in it if it's a historic building?
An undesirable use,
You have the Community Preservation Task Force.
if you have an undesirable use, then
Yeah, but that doesn't
you
affect
could
the
declare it a
use.
nuisance, or you can decide that it's not acceptable, and then you would prohibit that use, and it would only be grandfathered until
I mean, correct me, Chief James, but I think we had an FBI sting in an old building with character because there was sex trafficking going on.
well, it doesn't mean you have to get rid of the building. It means you just have to get rid of the use. If the building,
That's an illegal use. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a police action.
that wouldn't warrant taking the building down. I mean, if you have an illegal use.
No, but let's say someone wants to gets a tenant out through the process
well, once
because they
get-
want to do something else with it.
I don't know, I think if you got a police problem, that's a whole separate
Yeah,
issue.
but it maybe doesn't even have to get to that level.
If you have a significant building that you think should be preserved, then the property owner should know about it. Why should the property owner be thinking that they can redevelop the building and then find out they can't? I mean, I think there's the city has some obligation to tell a property owner that, hey, you have a significant building and you can't demolish it.
Well, I have a different take on this, Ken. We just adopted this on September 19th, last September 19th. We haven't really given this particular ordinance a chance to let us work through it. I'm inclined to accept the staff recommendation, leave it the way it is, let us see what the impacts, what comes out of this. Right now, it's not clear to me that we do anyone in this city a favor by making a determination of what is a historical structure and what isn't, and how we're prohibiting the owners from either tearing it down or altering it in some way.
Well, did you think that the project on Vallejo was better, that it came to the council and then everybody started tearing apart the new design without any consideration of the older structure? I mean, that was...
My bias and my preference is to let the Planning Commission take care of design issues. I make
exactly.
no bones about that. But, so my suggestion is that we take the staff recommendation, work with this ordinance that's in place now for at least another 9 months till we come to a year's anniversary here.
I don't
And
want to put a time limit on it, but I'll move that we leave things as they are.
Do I hear a second to that?
I have a comment, and that is that what we have in these two ordinances are very different things, and I think that we should acknowledge that. The commercial is more in line with what Ken is actually describing, where you have criteria. It's not similar to other cities in that other cities empower some body to say, yes, these buildings are subject to preservation, and it also provides the opportunity to file suit if you think that a decision to demolish a structure has been made incorrectly. So that's what we have for commercial. For the residential, it's very different. It's not really a preservation ordinance. It preserves the existing housing stock, but it has this comparison to what is being proposed in its stead. And what Ken is suggesting is to, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to bring the residential more in line with what is typical as a preservation ordinance. In other words, you have criteria to determine what structures are worth saving. And what Ken is suggesting, what I think is important to do for the commercial, is to actually identify, first of all, I think that for the commercial structures, we should identify those that we think satisfy the criteria. For the residential, I think that we should have criteria, and we should also identify them. Now, the one thing that's missing is neighborhood character. And in some cities, you have a neighborhood designated. And I actually don't know how they go about determining that a structure in the neighborhood is okay to be demolished. In other words, it's not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. Okay.
I think the Park Avenue Committee kind of did that with their Tier 1 and Tier 2 buildings. Diana, is that?
Well, that's very building specific.
Commercial,
But see, when you're talking about preserving a neighborhood,
Right.
okay, and that is the value that I'm hearing, that it's not about identifying historic residential buildings. It's about preserving neighborhood. And I actually think that we should identify residential structures, but we should also think more about another scheme of preserving the neighborhood, and I'm not sure what that should be. One option is to go about it through the various zoning strictures, not identifying specific buildings, but zoning strictures. So that's what's going on, and I think Mayor Davis, you're right. I think that we can test it out for more months, but that's when, at the point that you're comfortable revisiting this, that's essentially what I'm going to say.
Yeah, John, just let me make a comment on quote, quote, preserving the neighborhood. As you know, you're a member of the Community Preservation Task Force, and we're struggling with this issue of these 50s apartment houses that were plunked down into the residential areas that certainly they may provide housing marginally, but that's about all they do. And they do not, they are extant now. They do not contribute to the flavor of the neighborhood, except, of course, they do provide housing. So we have to think very carefully
Oh, I agree.
about our neighborhoods, because unfortunately, in the 50s and the 60s, a lot of these structures were either built or like the houses that are built along 43rd Street that encroach on the public right-of-way with their driveways. You know, we have to think carefully about that. Let's get a breathing space here with this ordinance. Let's really take a look at it. Yes, Charlie, you interrupted
I'm sorry.
my flow, but go ahead. I was getting too wordy anyhow. We got enough of that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just
interrupt.
wanted to respond to Councilmember Fricke's concern about neighborhood character. From the residential demolition ordinance, one of the findings that the city council must make in order to approve demolition of a residential structure is that it will provide at least the same number of dwelling units as the number in the demolished structure, the new project that is, that the replacement structure would feature design quality that is as high or higher than the demolished structure and that is compatible with the character of the neighborhood, and that the elimination of the residential structure would not be materially detrimental to the housing needs or the public interest of the affected neighborhood and the city. So the city council is required to consider neighborhood character when you approve one of these residential demolitions.
But how could you get the detail of the designs of these older structures in these new projects? You just can't do that.
Well, that's up to the council to decide when you judge an individual project.
All right, you made a motion, Dick, that we follow this for a year?
Yeah, I didn't put a time limit on it.
All right.
It's just, I think we'll just, I just think staff gets the idea that it needs to come back after we see how it's doing. So if people are more comfortable passing the motion with a time limit, I'm okay with that.
You know, I wouldn't mind sending it to the planning commission to see if they have any revision ideas, because there were a couple of commissioners that emailed me that said they thought it was good that I was raising this issue. So maybe, would it be harmful to send it to the planning commission, see if they have any ideas about revising it?
I agree. I think that's a good idea.
I mean,
Can we hear from Charlie on this?
Well, that's a policy decision on your part. I don't think it can hurt.
Oh, you can handle it.
so that would be my substitute motion would be to send.
I can certainly put it on their agenda.
See if they have any concerns about it.
Second.
That's okay.
Call the roll. Send it to the planning commission. Is there any exception to that?
No, I'm okay
All
with
right,
that.
moving on.